Dumelang. Sanibonani ekuseni. Goeiemorgen. On behalf of His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Botswana, Dr. Mokgweetsi Eric Yabetswe Masisi, let me also take this opportunity to express delight at having been invited to come and take a part in this historic moment, and also to congratulate South Africa in this effort. Not only is this an historic moment for South Africa, but it is so for members of the Southern African Customs Union. We gather here to witness the beginning of preferential trade under the African Continental Free Trade area in our customs union, and this marks a significant milestone in our collective pursuit of economic integrity and prosperity. The AfCFTA provides an opportunity for the continent to enhance its productive capacity and to build robust regional value chains to effectively supply the African market, comprising about 55 countries with an estimation of about 1.3 billion consumers and a combined GDP of around 3.4 trillion US dollars. For SACU, the importance attached to the AfCFTA cannot be overemphasized. The AfCFTA will enable the SACU region and the continent at large to deepen integration, to move that is in line with the SACU's own objectives. And for this reason, SACU has placed the implementation of the AfCFTA amongst its top priorities. All our 5 member states have ratified the AfCFTA, thus cementing our commitment to participate in the continental free trade regime. If I bring it closer to home, the agreement provides, when I say home, I mean Botswana, it provides a wider access for Botswana's exports, facilitates access to imports and raw materials needed for production, and it provides consumers with a wide choice of products at competitive prices. Furthermore, the AfCFTA provides the business community with access to new and dynamic growing economies in the continent, which include Nigeria, Egypt, Kenya, and Rwanda, amongst others, and thus reduce reliance on traditional markets. The agreement also provides a platform for small, medium, and micro enterprises to integrate into the regional economy, as well as accelerate women and youth empowerment. Improving women's access to trade opportunities not only facilitates economic freedom for women, but it also expands the productive capacity of our country. We must use the AfCFTA to advance the empowerment of women and our youth. Ladies and gentlemen, to facilitate the implementation of the agreement, Botswana, we have joined the 33 other states parties to take part in a platform introduced by the AfCFTA Secretariat, ably led by the Secretary General, the Guided Trade Initiative. The Guided Trade Initiative is intended to fast-track trade under the AfCFTA. It provides networking and connection between buyers and sellers from the continent to ensure that actual trade between countries does take place. It also identifies export-ready companies and hence holds them to churn the aspiration to trade into actual movement of goods. And Botswana's geographic location, coupled with integrated transport network and information and communication technology, will enable us to take the advantages offered by the AfCFTA. The Kazungula Bridge, which has been constructed between Botswana and Zambia over the Zambezi River, provides a one-stop border facility or service which will provide the necessary trade connection route between the southern central parts of Africa and the northern parts. With an astonishing market size of over 1.3 billion persons in the continent, it is incumbent upon the private sector to seize and capitalize on the opportunities to grow their business through regional value chains and cross-border trade. I would therefore urge the private sector to take advantage of the opportunities offered by the AfCFTA, for without the participation of the private sector, all these efforts will become meaningless. As I draw to conclusion, the premier cargo and container port, you have indeed made the Southern African Customs Union proud. May this mark the beginning of a new era of prosperity, collaboration for Botswana, South Africa, and the entire African continent. Ladies and gentlemen, greatness is on the horizon, nothing but greatness. I thank you for your kind attention. Nelwangi Pula.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much to my dear colleague. And it's next my pleasure. We've now spoken about the exporting countries from SACU, but we export to other neighbors and we buy from neighbors. And one of the countries we're exporting to today, in a ship that is 3 kilometers in the same port, is a ship that will go to Kenya. So it is my pleasure then to invite my dear colleague, Minister Rebecca Miano, the Trade Minister of Kenya, to come and address us. You are very welcome. And we will be sending a consignment of refrigerators to keep Kenyan food nicely chilled and able to be enjoyed at its very best. Those wonderful fruits of Kenya will be in the refrigerator.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. All protocols observed. On behalf of the President of the Republic of Kenya, Dr. William Ruto, and the people of Kenya, allow me to congratulate you, Your Excellency, sir, for the positive move by the Republic of South Africa for agreeing to join countries that are already trading under the AfCFTA, Kenya among them. The importance of the AfCFTA market cannot be overemphasized. By launching these first consignments, South Africa has confirmed the importance of this market and demonstrated its readiness to trade under the AfCFTA. It is also an indication that South Africa is ready to receive imports from the AfCFTA countries whose tariff offers have been finalized and adopted by the AU Assembly. We are beginning to see the changing direction of the level of intra-African trade, which has been very low at less than 10%. As you know, Kenya started trading under this framework towards the end of 2022 by sending her first consignment of tea and later other products exported to the African market under the AfCFTA. Since then, a number of other products have been exported under this framework. These countries have demonstrated that they are open, they have an open market for each other, for various products they produce, and therefore ready to trade. In the coming weeks, Kenya will also be flagging off its consignments to South Africa, which will include tea, coffee, and other products that are in demand, in great demand in this country. Let us all endeavor to join the AfCFTA trade and make it a reality. I also wish the vessel that is traveling to Kenya a safe sail and a safe arrival to Kenya. Asanteni sana. Thank you very much.
And can I say a very thank you? Oops. Can I say thank you to my colleague? And I'm going to now finally ask Minister Toko Didiza, our very own Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, who will make the closing remarks on behalf of all the ministers who have been present here today. Dear colleague, welcome.
Thank you very much, Minister Patel, our President, President Ramaphosa, Premier Nomsa Dube Ngube, ministers of the Southern African Customs Union, and ministers of the AfCFTA present here, our MEC Duma of the province who's here, and the deputy ministers, and all the business people who are here today. Very important because this is about you. I just want to recall that actually what is happening today is what our founding mothers and fathers envisaged in 1991 under the Organization of African Union Unity. Some of you might remember before it became the AU. One of the decisions they took when they signed the Abuja Treaty was actually about the creation of the Africa Free Trade Area, the Customs Union, the central banks, and the Monetary Union. And when the AU took over, it continued with some of those ideals. And when a decision was taken by our heads of state in the African Union, particularly under the vision of the Africa we want, the AfCFTA was one of those important areas that we wanted to fulfill. And today, therefore, indeed, it's a great moment for Africa, particularly our forefathers and those of us who have taken the baton going forward. Many have spoken about trade, which is very important, but I want to say one of the important things about this trade area is its contribution to food security for the continent. When there were the disruptions as a result of COVID-19, one of the important decisions that was taken by the ministers of agriculture in the continent, together with the ministers of trade and finance, was to make sure that whatever we do in saving lives and livelihoods, we should make sure that no one goes to bed without food. That made sure that in our governance systems, we had to enable the movement of goods between our countries, particularly those who are landlocked countries, not to find themselves without food when majority of us in protecting livelihoods, we had to close the borders. And I would like to commend the ministers of trade in particular for having worked with the ministers of agriculture in the continent to make sure that happens. But importantly, again today, what we're seeing is the work that has been done that has included the ministers of agriculture in harmonizing our phytosanitary and sanitary measures, as well as working towards improving our biosecurity so that the movement of goods cannot be hindered by non-trade barriers which may arise as a result of uneven standards, which might then cause some irritations. And I'm actually hopeful, as the Minister of Agriculture, that as we receive the tea from Kenya, and President, this is one of the things you promised when you met with President Ruto in your state visits, you actually challenged us and said, why is there a problem that we can't have Kenyan tea and coffee in South Africa? Here you are, it's now on its way. And what is exciting about the AfCFTA is that no one will be left behind, including your smallholder farmers as well as your small businesses. It allows us opportunity for regional trade as well as continental trade among us. It might not be easy, but I think those who have started, like Kenya, as she has said, indeed, it is possible that we can trade these goods. And if you look at our continent, particularly its fauna, as well as the diversity of our agricultural products in the continent, we are even much more richer. So that exchange will enable us to grow our agricultural economies in particular, but also to contribute to industrialization. Minister Patel, you know that without some of the agricultural produce, you can't do anything in some of your industrial goods. So we're a very important sector. You don't take us very small, eh? Because without us, you're not going to eat, but also without us, you're not going to have your starches, and you're not going to have your contributions to ethanol through sugar. So we can lighten up our continent using our jatrova, our sugar, our maize, and maybe we can change to millet instead of eating maize, and we can use it for industrialization. So I'd like to say congratulations to all of you, but more importantly, congratulations to our heads of state, represented by President Ramaphosa seated here, who really made sure that they challenge all of us as ministers, particularly ministers of trade, to effect this vision to become a reality. And thank you, SG, for having really worked hard with your team to make sure that we are here today. Thank you very much.
Well, I'd like to thank Minister Didiza for those remarks. I should also say that we are missing today a dear colleague, Minister Shelile from Lesotho. He took ill and was unable to join us, but he sends his very warm regards when we contacted him a few days ago. The message from all of this is Kenyan tea in the morning and rooibos tea in the evening. This brings us to the end of the first segment, and we now go to the second segment, where we want to welcome His Excellency President Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa and distinguished guests. Welcome, Mr. President, to the port of Durban, here in the land of King Shaka, who forged the Zulu nation from a group of separate peoples, of John Dube, who led the formation of the African National Congress to unite the African people of this country, of Albert Luthuli, Chief Luthuli, of the first Nobel Peace winner coming from South Africa. There are defining moments in history. Some are noisy, some are quiet. African countries are mainly trading with the outside world through selling rocks and oil or raw materials and importing finished goods and capital goods. This has left us poor, it's left us vulnerable, it's left us dependent. Today represents the moment when we pivot away from that model to trading with neighbors, to trading with food, with manufactured products, with services, with digital products. It's a tectonic moment, Mr. President. It shifts the landscape. I want to quote from one of Africa's indigenous languages, Swahili. Milima haikutani, binadamu hukutana. Mountains don't meet, but people meet. Mr. President, Africa is taking its destiny in its own hands with the start of trade under the AfCFTA. And we need to do it. Africa represents 17% of the world's population, but accounts for only 3% of global GDP and 1% of global output of manufactured products like steel, like automobiles. But therein lies an opportunity to drive more economic activity to the well-being of our people. Mr. President, we have organized a formal ceremony that was preceded by speeches, some of which you were able to follow. But we also had 3 exporters who addressed us, ranging from grinding media to refrigerators and food. We have the attendance of a number of dignitaries here. The Premier of KZN, members of the South African Cabinet and Deputy Ministers, Professor Benedict Urama, the head of Afrixim Bank, business leaders from BUSA, the Black Business Council, and a number of private sector firms. The chair of Transnet Board Andile Sankru and CEO Michelle Phillips. Directors generals and heads of agencies all have assembled here, and in another room nearby, Mr. President, that has taken the overflow of people we could not accommodate here. Following your address, Excellency, we will ask you to open the launch ceremony with 4 actions. First, a short tour by the President and African trade ministers to an exhibition of 18 companies here on our left, displaying goods that will be shipped to other parts of the continent today and during February. They include many products, and we will highlight it as we walk through it, ranging from foods to safety boots to steel products to electricity boards and others. Second, Mr. President, you will then proceed to a stamping ceremony. Minister Gordon, who is responsible for Transnet, will accompany the acting CEO, Michelle Phillips, as well as the KZN head of the South African Revenue Service, Dan Zulu, carrying a certificate of export, complying with the rules of origin, and they will present it officially to the President. Mr. President, we will ask you then to affix the official stamp on the document, onto the certificate. Thirdly, the President will then approach the truck that is carrying the first container that we're marking, and it's filled with these grinding media balls. Grinding media balls, these are used to grind products into a finer form. It mixes materials such as chemicals and paints. It's used in mining, and we chose it because it shows South Africa's contribution to the industrialization of Ghana. We're not selling only finished goods. We're selling the industrial products from which other manufactured products can be made. And at the same time, there will also be electricity and water meters that will be loaded in a subsequent container that will bring stability and the ability of consumers to monitor their usage of electricity and water. And it's used in businesses. Mr. President, that product is destined for Ghana. You will then be asked to cut a ribbon that's tied to a container on a truck. That symbolically releases the truck. The truck will then move to where the crane is. But before it moves, Mr. President, we have another job for you. So we will ask you to take a drumstick and to approach a drum and to officially beat that drum. And as you beat that drum, the truck will leave and go to the crane. And from there, the crane will come down and will take the container, and Michelle will take us through the process of getting that container onto the ship. I've already, and once the container's on the vessel, the show is on the road, or should I say, it's on the sea. That ship there, President, Navios Verde, it means green ship. I told the audience you can be fooled by the color, but imagine it as green. It can take 5,000 containers, and it has goods in it from different parts of the world and different parts of the African continent. It's like a sea taxi. It stops here, it stops there, loads on, loads off. And if it was full to capacity, the Transnet team, Tim, assures me that it will be able to take 500 million oranges. So, Minister Didiza, there's enough space to get your oranges out. And that will then mark the end of the presidential segment of the ceremony. We'll have photo shoots, President. We'll ask that you briefly join African trade ministers in a photo. It will be followed by SACU trade ministers with you. It will be followed by the exhibitors, the exporters. They will join you for a photo. Then Transnet and the SARS team led by Minister Gordon will join you with a photo. The DTIC and DALRA teams, officials, are then invited to join Minister Didiza and myself with you in a photo. And then we proceed with the rest of the program. The President leaves to immediately visit another facility on logistics, not for goods, but for people, a bridge that is being launched and opened shortly hereafter in this beautiful province of KwaZulu-Natal. Trade, President, will continue with 12 countries that have finished their legal work. It's Algeria, Cameroon, Egypt, Mauritius, Ghana, Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Tunisia, as well as Eswatini and Lesotho and South Africa. It will be joined shortly by Botswana and Namibia. And of course, all the other countries now are finalizing modalities. We can expect within weeks many more of the launch of trade. I end off. In December 2020, in the middle of the COVID crisis, His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa chaired an extraordinary summit of the African Union. And in that meeting, the President presided over a historic decision where the African heads of state and government decided they are ready to switch on the implementation phase of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Ministers of Trade were then given the green light to finalize everything else, which has been done. And under your leadership, President, the start button was pressed. During those challenging times, the President was also appointed by his colleagues to be the champion for the African Tanzania, the trade ministers, the ministers from all the African countries, the business community, everybody present here awaits your thoughts, your words, Mr. President. Please join me, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, as we welcome the President of the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency President Ramaphosa.
Thank you, Minister Patel. It's okay, it seems. I'm tempted to stand on all the protocol that has already been outlined here, but want to be proper and recognize the Premier of our province here in KZN and the MECs that she works with. I saw Minister MEC Mtolo, Siboniso Duma, and I also saw a number of other MECs. But I also especially want to recognize ministers who work with Minister Patel in the South African cabinet. I want to recognize ministers who have come from far and afield to be part of this ceremony. And I'd like to thank you all for being here. It's a rather unusual place to be having a ceremony. It's rather unusual too for a minister to be as bold as Minister Patel has been to outline career-limiting tasks that he gives to the President. As he went through all these tasks, I just wondered, does he expect the President to do all these things? But he's been very bold. But it won't be career-limiting, don't worry. It's also wonderful to see business leaders who are here. I heard you say business leaders from various associations in our country, Black Business Council, BUSA, and many others. Today we witness a historic moment in Africa's economic destiny. And as I listened, Minister Patel, to the products that we are going to be shipping and buying amongst ourselves, it took me down history to understand how momentous other moments were. Right at the beginning somehow, a rather sad one, where slavery was at its height, And slavery really revolved around certain goods, less so services. The services were labor, I guess, but certain goods that were being eked out of various locales in the world, where people were being exported from our own continent to other continents in the world to go and sweat and even die in the sugar plantations, to go and make tea and coffee in other lands. And these are products that we today are going to be trading with each other on. It's a funny world where today, as we take our own industrialization and our trading to a new level, we begin to trade amongst ourselves with the very, very products that were used to enslave us. It is a poignant moment for me, and to understand how momentous this was, an author who wrote quite extensively about slavery writes about a particular moment as they began struggling against slavery. And he says, to understand how momentous was this beginning, the beginning of the struggle against slavery, we must picture a world in which the vast majority of people are prisoners. Most of them know no other way of life. They are not free to live or go where they want to. They plant sugar, tea, coffee. They cultivate it, they harvest it, and they plant many other of the earth's major crops. They earn no money from their labor. Their work often lasts 12 to 14, up to 18 hours a day. Many are subject to cruel whippings or other punishments if they do not work hard enough. They die young. They are not chained or bound, or they are bound most of the time, but they are in bondage, part of a global economy based on forced slave labor. Such a world would, of course, be unthinkable today. I refer to Adam Hochschild's quotation from his book where he writes about bearing the chains of slavery. And I guess in many ways today, that is also in part what we are seeking to do here. We're bearing the chains of not trading with each other, with the very products that enslaved us, utilizing these products for our own upliftment. Professor Orama, I'm glad that you are here as well. I recognize you. It's good to have the Afro-Exim Bank with us. Today, we mark the start of preferential trade by South Africa under the African Continental Free Trade Area. A free trade area that has been so well shepherded by Secretary General Wamkele Mene. In a short while, we will be witnessing the sending off of the first shipment, as Minister Patel said, of products from South Africa to other African countries. This, for us, is quite phenomenal. Not that this has not been happening, but it is now going to happen under a new regime of the AfCFTA. This shipment demonstrates that the African Continental Free Trade Area has become a reality. We are in the port city of eThekwini, Durban, taking forward the dream of an ever larger and stronger Africa. An Africa that is free of slavery, of oppression, of any impediment. African countries trade with the rest of the world, but we have limited trade amongst ourselves. And as recently as just a little while ago, when I attended a ceremony just nearby here, South Africa, big ceremony, I saw that one of our neighbors had imported water, bottled water from Switzerland. And I said, we still have a long way to go to make sure that we really trade with ourselves. An African continent that is so well endowed with water, with various sources of water, but we still rely on water that we import from elsewhere in the world. This is the task we have. The reason for this is clear. We are principally exporters also of many other things that we should not be exporting, that we export on an unprocessed basis, like raw materials. And I often say we export dust, rock, and soil. And we sell this, and Minister Patel added black liquid. We sell this to the world. And instead of harnessing our oil and our other minerals to industrialize our continent. And interestingly, even those that we sell to are now saying we should no longer be buying all these raw materials from you. You should now be insisting that the raw materials must be turned into finished goods so that we buy finished goods from you. And this is a consciousness that must become much richer and more prevalent amongst us. So we do need to change this. The young people on our continent are calling for this change, and all of us must start propagating this message. Over the last few years, our trade ministers have been really busy finalizing the rules of origin of what constitutes an African product. And for the life of me, I never really thought that this was an involved task. And it was only one time when sitting with Minister Patel, and he took me through the full list, many, many products. And they have done well to finalize what I would say is 92% of the products that nations trade with each other. And I'm happy to see so many of Africa's trade ministers here today. You honor us by your presence, and we thank you for being here. And let's give them a round of applause for being here. You honor us by coming to be with us as we celebrate this moment. We want all those who are deployed in various positions, be they ministers of trade, agriculture, or whatever, to be even bolder as they deal with these matters as they go forward. The products that we trade amongst ourselves must truly be products that are made in Africa. And let us focus on that. It's only now of late, a few years ago, that I have started looking at everything that I either wear or pick up. I always want to look, where has it been made? And as I look at that, I immediately do the calculations. How many workers would have made this item? So as leaders, that's what we should infuse our thinking with. That we should be asking ourselves, where was an item made? I was sitting here, Minister Patel, looking at the helmet that you are forcing me to wear today. And I've looked and asked myself, where has it been made? This thing here, I still want to undress it. And I want to undress it in the privacy because I want to see exactly where it has been made. So I've now reached a level of consciousness where I want to know where everything is made. The modalities for trade in goods has moved faster than services. We therefore need to put more effort into building African champions in finance, in retail, in telecommunications, and in expanding tourism between African countries, where Africans shall, as they move around, pride themselves with buying things that are made by other Africans. This is the only way in which our economies can be able to grow faster and sustainably. China is where it is, number 2 in the world today, economically. That growth was much more, that positioning rather, was much more driven by a reliance on their own market, on their own consumers, on the things that they make themselves. Yes, they've been the factory of the world, but more and more, Chinese are now buying their own goods, their own homemade goods. And the same thing can happen to us, that we should be deriving a great deal of pride, not only to say I want to drink coffee from Kenya, I want to consume sugar from Eswatini, I want to drive in a vehicle where the harness has been put together in Botswana. So the African Continental Free Trade Area creates the world's largest free trade area by number of countries and has the potential to bring transformative change and tremendous opportunities to African economies and businesses. The implementation of the AfCFTA will accelerate the development of regional and local value chains, offering investors access to a population of 1.7 billion in a few years, because we are a fast, in terms of population, growing continent with a huge GDP. Industrial development is core to Africa's integration. It builds Africa's productive capacities, and it adds greater value to other products and diversifies trade beyond the traditional commodities. We have already seen the potential of greater cross-border collaboration. And just to give a very good, simple and straightforward example, and I referred to it earlier, just in the auto industry, South African automotive companies source their leather for the car seats from a factory in Lesotho, which employs close on to 1,000 workers. And they then bring in wiring of harnesses, all the wires that drive the car, from Botswana at 2 plants employing several thousand workers. And then they source the copper wire from Zambia, the rubber from Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, Malawi, Ghana, Cameroon, and the steering wheel components from Tunisia. And of course, we want these workers who put these cars together, as they take a break, to have a tea break or a coffee break. They must be drinking tea from Kenya. They must be drinking tea or coffee from Kenya, from Tanzania. And that is how our integration can be said to be really successful. Now, these inputs alone, by themselves, will not be able to be sufficient to take us to a high level. However, they accounted for more than $200 million worth of products traded amongst African countries, and the scope to do more is available to us. It's really there for the taking. But it requires bold rules of origin. For every 1% of extra African content, there is an opportunity for a factory or a mine based on the continent to supply the products. And as the world moves to green, industrialization, Africa is also well positioned to use our critical minerals to leverage industrialization on the continent. Now, the opportunities are vast. There are many, and there are also many in food, in beverages, in vehicles, in trucks, in clothing and textiles. We have the capacity to produce more of our own pharmaceutical products and medical equipment. We had the Secretary General of the AfCFTA talking about this. Investment can flow to the production of chemicals, machinery and equipment, household goods, and many, many, many more. On the side of our proceedings here at the quayside, we have assembled a few products, I'm told, and instructed, that illustrate what will be exported today and in the weeks ahead. Beyond the industrialization of which I have spoken, this continental market can indeed help us promote agricultural development and food security for our continent. Through our work, we can ensure that young people and women-owned firms are active in export markets. The protocol on women and youth in trade will also help ensure that the African Continental Free Trade Area does indeed contribute to inclusive growth as well as development. Now, as Africans, we have a very unique opportunity to lift millions of people out of poverty by empowering the women of our continent as well as young people, and to change the continent's business environment. This is one of the greatest opportunities that Africa has, an opportunity that we have under our own control, that is not fueled by colonialists, that is not fueled by oppressors, but that is fueled by our own ambition. The levels of intra-Africa trade have been growing in recent years, but they remain small by global standards, and we need to upgrade them. Intra-Africa exports are reported, I'm told, to stand around 16% of Africa's total exports, compared to 55% of intra-Asia exports, and 49% of North America exports, and 63% of European Union trade dealings. Now, for South Africa, as with many other African countries, the start of preferential trade will create great opportunities for growth and development. And I have been saying, for our growth potential, we need to pivot the Africa Continental Free Trade Area as a lever that we can utilize to catapult our country to greater levels of growth. Not only will it benefit our country's producers, but it will also see a huge increase in traffic through our ports, our airports, and our land-based border posts as well. Now, the products made in Gauteng and Limpopo, Northwest Free State, Mpumalanga, and the Northern Cape will flow through these ports to markets beyond our borders. Now, this is why, as the South African government, we are indeed focused on implementing our freight logistics roadmap to improve the efficiency and the competitiveness of our country's rail lines and ports. We are working closely with industry to fix the challenges that Transnet is facing in the immediate term, and to ensure greater investment in infrastructure into the future. Now, as I conclude, allow me to thank the Secretary General of the AfCFTA Secretariat and his team for facilitating and guiding the negotiations that were difficult, were long, but were eventually successful to set up the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And I want to thank the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Council of Ministers and Minister Patel also and his team for their hard work negotiating the AfCFTA agreements and protocols. There was a time when I thought that they would never finish, because at times it was like herding cats into a crawl. And you know how cats behave. You can never get them to be of one mind. Last but not least, I wish indeed to express my appreciation to the exporters who have embraced this opportunity. It's a profitable opportunity, I must say, but who have embraced it and have worked with us to be part of the first shipment of products under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Now, from this quayside and from ports, airports and border posts across the continent, a truly new era of growth and prosperity is being born. And I would say that the rebirth of Africa that Pixley Isaka Kaseme spoke about at Columbia University years ago is what we could say is now emerging. This will represent the rebirth of our continent. In the end, a great future awaits our continent and its people. And trade is what we need to now unleash to make sure that that future comes closer to us. So I thank you very much. For me, with all the tasks that I've been given, I will do them with a great deal of joy and alacrity without threatening anyone to be doing something that's career limiting. Thank you very much.
Well, I'd like to thank His Excellency for those remarks that go to the heart of what it is that we're trying to do with the free trade area. President, you sprung a question on us and you said you hope that the hard hats are locally made and that you asked where they were made. So as you spoke, the messages were coming through WhatsApp from my team, and they assure me that the jackets that are yellow and orange are locally made. They said to me the hats are locally made, but being skeptical by nature, I decided to look at the hat. And inside the hat there is a label. And the label says Safeco Tire A Industrial Safety Helmet. And it's got a long bit of things there, and it ends up by saying manufactured by Safeco, 18 Wattle Road, Newlands, Johannesburg, Gauteng, South Africa. I take that to be sufficient proof. But then they also said to me, you must throw in an extra bit, Minister. Assure the President that the safety boots that the Transnet team is wearing is not only locally made, but the company that makes it is displaying